My name is DeCamillis. I'm Program Director at Gilda's Club Twin Cities. We're a cancer support organization, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Gilda's and what it is that we do. But tonight what I wanted to talk about was how there's a ripple effect when there's a cancer diagnosis, and how that ripple really impacts caregivers, family members, friends, coworkers, and that we often at Gilda's Club talk about cancer impacting the whole family the whole time. And so we recognize that it's not just the individual who's living with a diagnosis, but it's so many individuals who are impacted throughout a cancer experience. So tonight I wanted to talk about caring and how that creates an endless ripple, and what are some supportive tips for caregiving and living with cancer. So just for my general frame of reference, so I can get an idea of who you are in the audience, how many of you have been impacted by cancer either personally or have a close family member or friend, just by show of hands? So really not surprising, lots of, pretty much everybody, 100%. So many people are impacted by cancer. And again, we just find that when we talk about it from a systems perspective, that it helps us to understand how can we be more supportive, how can we actually get support. So again, feel free to ask questions, feel free to make this as informal and engaging as you want it to be tonight. I'm certainly here for you. So just a little bit about Gilda's Club before we get started, so you kind of have a sense of where I'm coming from. We are a place, we actually have a physical location, and we refer to it as our clubhouse. Our mission is to ensure that all people impacted by cancer are empowered by knowledge, strengthened by action, and sustained by community. And that concept of community is actually really key to the type of support that we provide. And our core values are that we believe that support should be there for men, for women, for young people, children, teens, young adults, including family members, friends, and coworkers as well. So when we talk about support for the whole family, we're really talking about support for the entire system. We believe, very central to our value, is that people are welcome to come as they are, because there's nothing more off-putting than to feel like you don't fit into a community. And that the empowerment actually happens through the community. And very importantly, too, everything that we offer is at no cost. All of our groups are free. So what is it that we actually do? I'm going to touch on this now, and I'll be a little bit more in depth as we move throughout the night. But we actually provide support in 5 different program areas. Comprehensive social and emotional support, and we believe that this is a complement to medical care. Again, I mentioned that we have a clubhouse. We're located off of 394 and 169 area. And when we talk about who do we serve individuals who are living with cancer. We serve caregivers, family members, friends, people who are living with loss, as well as individuals who are moving beyond treatment, and many plus year survivors, including kids, teens, and young adults. So tonight, what are we going to talk about? What does it mean to think about a cancer diagnosis as tossing a stone into still waters? What does that really mean? And why do we think about it in this way? I think it's important to think about it in this way because oftentimes when a cancer diagnosis comes into the family, people think, I don't really know how to give support. I don't really know how to accept support. And yet, support is such an integral part of moving through a cancer experience. We're also going to talk about some tips for self-care tonight, because self-care is really important, whether you're the caregiver, you're the family member, or you're the one living with a diagnosis, or if you're the one grieving the loss of someone due to cancer. And then I think, again, part of what people struggle with is there's a cancer diagnosis, but then how do I become emotionally available for that person? How do I really connect with them? How can I really be with them? Because when you say the word cancer, oftentimes it becomes the elephant in the room. People suddenly know it's there, but everybody's kind of peering around it. They're looking around. They don't necessarily know how to talk about it, how to begin to unfold the many layers that a cancer diagnosis is. And then we're also going to do just a little bit more getting to know Gilda's Club. I'm going to share a really special project that we have done and talk a little bit more about our program. I loved this quote. "For all is like an ocean, all flows and connects. Touch it in one place and it echoes at the other end of the world." So when I think of cancer, when I think of somebody that you love getting a diagnosis, to me that's almost what it's like. It's like tossing a stone into water. And then the ripples are felt over and over and over again. So what you may not know about a cancer diagnosis, and because so many of you have been impacted, you may know this. And hopefully if you do know this, hopefully it resonates for you. But when I come and I speak on behalf of my community, my background is actually as a licensed mental health professional. I'm a clinical counselor and an art therapist. And so I hear lots and lots and lots of stories. And in this story gathering, I feel like it's my job when I'm invited to come out into the community and talk, I feel like it's my job to be an advocate and to help share and educate about what I hear, because it's so important. Oftentimes people feel very misunderstood when cancer is in the family. And so I thought we could just start off with what you might not know about cancer. So chronic illnesses, like cancer, can be very isolating. They can be isolating for a number of reasons, but mostly because life gets changed so dramatically. And when life is changed so dramatically, oftentimes it's hard to know what, if you're the one living with cancer, what is my life like anymore? All the things that I used to love to do or that I could do so easily no longer come easily to me. And if you're the caregiver, if you're the family member, the friend who's trying to connect with somebody, oftentimes, again, it's that elephant in the room where you just don't really know how to connect. You don't know how to approach or what to say. So it's also important to remember that especially a new diagnosis can be really traumatic. I heard that the next presentation coming up is going to be on trauma. Well, there's a good amount of trauma that comes with a cancer diagnosis. And again, it's because life gets flipped upside down and turns inside out. Suddenly, life was going along. You kind of had your trajectory, right? You had your plan. And then within a matter of a day, a moment, a couple of weeks, suddenly those plans halt. They get changed. And then what? There's a lot of trauma in it. There's a lot of trauma that happens to the body. There's a lot of trauma that happens with the heart. A person's sense of identity can also become really challenged for a number of reasons, and we'll talk about those a little bit. But when a cancer diagnosis comes into the family, for the individual living with a cancer diagnosis, it could be that what they used to do doesn't come easily anymore. It could be that your day-to-day suddenly has so many new to-dos in it. If you're a caregiver, suddenly you take on the identity of a caregiver, of tending to somebody, of putting others' needs before your own. And so again, our sense of identity gets really challenged with a cancer diagnosis. I often think that cancer, and this is part of the trauma, it's a little bit like learning a new language and being plopped into a different country. So you have been practicing Italian for 3 years. You are planning for this wonderful trip to Italy. You love Italy, can't wait to get there, love the lasagna, the Italian food. You get on the plane, you're like, heading to Italy. All of a sudden, you land and you're in Holland, and you're like, I don't have any maps for Holland. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to talk to. Cancer is a lot like that. When you have a diagnosis, all of a sudden you're put into a medical system. The doctors, the nurse practitioners, love them to pieces, but they talk a really different language, and it's a very big learning curve. And so oftentimes people are in the midst of all this newness, they're also having to then learn a new language, learn a new system, and that can be really difficult. Life also gets overwhelming really quick. I call this the cancer and. So maybe you have kids, and now there's a cancer. Maybe you're working full-time, and now there's cancer. Maybe you already had underlying mental health concerns, and now there's cancer. Or maybe you had another chronic illness, and now there's another layer called cancer. And so cancer, it's almost like this next layer that just kind of gets layered onto every single facet of life. And that's why it can become really overwhelming. Because if you were trying to figure out how to take the kids, get them to school before, now you layer in cancer, and that gets even more complex. And another thing I think that oftentimes happens is that the goals that you had, suddenly there's a really big question mark for a lot of people. I had this plan that I was going to retire, and then suddenly I retired and I got a cancer diagnosis. And all those plans I had of traveling with my spouse, those aren't going to happen anymore, at least in this time. And so, again, life kind of gets put on a hold. And a lot of people really struggle with that because the rest of the world just kind of keeps going and going and going. And it can lead, again, to feelings of isolation. And then the other thing that I don't necessarily feel that a lot of people recognize is that there's a tremendous amount of loss with a cancer diagnosis. Even when there's not death, there's a lot of loss. And so oftentimes for folks who are moving into post-treatment, I will hear them say in groups, you know, everybody is cheering me on, going, oh, great, you're done. But they're like, but I'm not done. This isn't over. This has changed my entire life. And so again, there's a lot of loss. There's a lot to process. It could be changes in relationships, changes in what you can do or how you can do it. So I like this little image because my life gets flipped upside down. And cancer changes everything. So we kind of talked about how does it change? It changes who you are. It changes the very essence, the sense of identity that oftentimes people knew who they were. Now it changes body image. It changes the roles, the relationships that you have in life. Sometimes it changes the goals. For many people, it can change priorities and perspectives. Oftentimes, people will say that is the silver lining of a cancer diagnosis, is how life priorities, perspectives get shifted in ways that might be difficult, but also are really humbling, really giving them opportunities to connect to people in a time that's really difficult. Sometimes work, leisure changes, energy, abilities, activities, interests, financial status, even a person's sexuality and how they are intimate with others. All those things change. So again, when you think of all that change, that's a lot, isn't it? It's huge. It's a huge amount of change. On her back it says, "You never know how strong you are until strong is the only choice you have." And so I share that because even in light of all these things that change, I truly believe that's human resiliency at its finest, at its core. This ability to go, yes, all these things have changed, and life is not what I knew it to be, but now I'm going to get to see other facets of myself and to explore strength and inner strength in ways that I have yet to do. So I often talk again about how does cancer shift identity? And I call it the to be or the not to be. Are you going to become an advocate? Some people consider or put the label of hero onto others. Survivor is a term that kind of gets tossed around a lot. I hear a lot of people say, I really don't like the term survivor. And some people are like, I like that term a lot. Kids that I've worked with, they're like, I hate being the cancer kid. I just want to be a kid. I hate being the cancer kid, or I hate being the teen who has a parent with cancer. There's so many different labels that get tossed upon us when these new things come into our life that begin to change our identity and how not only we see ourselves, but how people see us. And so again, I think it's just important to recognize these, because when you're thinking of how do you support a person, these are things that they might be thinking of. They might be challenged with figuring out how do they want to identify themselves. And for each person, it's really individual. There's no right, there's no wrong. That's the cool thing. You kind of just get to claim it for what you want it to be. But it is a process of re-identifying who you are, what's important to you, what are your values. And so again, cancer creates a ripple effect. Not only is it true for the patient, But much of this is also true for caregivers. And so at Gilda's Club, when we talk about cancer's impact, caregivers are an integral part of the system of support. But they too are also having their lives challenged, their identities challenged, and lots of the ways that they know life to be are shifting and changing. And so when we think of relationship shifts, it can shift with spouses. Relationship shifts can change with children, with friends, with social networks, even within the work environment, should you still be working, either as a caregiver or somebody living with cancer. Oftentimes it can shift the dynamics in the relationships. So here's what we thought we could talk about tonight. So how do you, knowing that when cancer comes into your life, whether it's yourself or a family member, how can you show up for somebody? How can you support somebody who's impacted by cancer? And one of the things that I often tell people, the most important thing is that you just show up and that you're authentic. The most important thing is that you show up. I mean, that sounds pretty simple, right? But I will tell you, for so many people, I hear stories about, well, I had really close family members, I had really close friends, and all of a sudden, I started to see them leave. So why is it so hard to show up? Well, it's hard to show up because it's really difficult to have cancer impacting your life or your family. But it's really important, too, to be able to show up in ways that feel authentic to you, in ways that feel doable to you. And so we often talk about how can you just be honest and open about what you can do or can't do. Because that's part of showing up, too, is just being honest and saying, well, you know, gotta say, I'm really not a very good listener, or it's really hard for me to hear emotional stuff, but I sure could take you out to a movie whenever you want it. That's actually okay, right? But you're being honest, you're being open about what you can and what you can't do. Or maybe you're the person who says, you know, I can set up a meal train for you. You just tell me what kind of food you like and I'll make that happen. That's a great way of showing up. Or maybe you are the person who is emotionally available for people, and your way of showing up is that you're writing cards, or you're just picking up the phone, or you're sending a text to say, just thinking of you. Showing up comes in a lot of different ways, but showing up authentically really truly just means that you're being present, and that your presence is authentic, and that you authentically want to be there. And so oftentimes people will say, but what do I say? So again, just be open, be sensitive. Remember, life has been dramatically flipped, and some people might want to do what they used to, and others simply might not be able to do what they could do before. And so you might have to adapt your relationship. You might have to adapt the ways that you show up, or adapt the things that you're offering. Maybe you used to go with your best friend to the gym, but since they had surgery, they can no longer go to the gym. And maybe you say, you know what? Let's just go for a walk around the block. That's a way of showing up. It's a way of also adapting to what the needs are for the individual who's living with. Or maybe you see that somebody is a caregiver and that they are just really becoming very tired. And maybe you show up by saying, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? Could I come and spend a couple hours so that you can go and have a rest? So there's lots of different ways of showing up. But you have to do it in a way that feels authentic to you and in a way that feels doable. The other thing that often happens is that people around cancer feel like, let me ask you this. Have you ever had a friend who's been in a really difficult spot and the only thing you really wanted to do was to tell them how to fix it? Right? It's kind of human nature to want to fix. But there are some things that we can fix and there are some things that we can't. And sometimes showing up just means knowing that you have to show up and be present, and you might not be able to fix things. And it's not really your job to have to fix it. Your job is just to show up. So, do. Again, sometimes people are like, what do I do? What do I not do? So I figured I could just offer you some of this. And if some of you are like, ooh, these are really wrong or really off base, raise your hand. Let's have a good conversation amongst us. So if you feel awkward, just acknowledge it. Acknowledge the situation. It's so much better for you to say, gosh, you know, like, I really don't know what to say, but this is really tough stuff. And I just want you to know that I'm here for you. Just acknowledge the awkwardness if that's what you feel. You know, sometimes it can just be really helpful to just reach out and touch somebody. Again, if you don't have words, just a little gentle hand or a pat or a touch on the back. Sometimes those simple gestures of love and comfort can go a really long way in letting somebody know that you might not have the words, but you are here. Like, you're right here, you're with them. Give them a call, send them a letter, write them a little note or even just a text just to let them know that you're thinking of them. Oftentimes, again, a diagnosis, a chronic illness is really isolating. And so people just want to know that they're still being thought of, that they're still feeling connected to. That's honestly what most people that come to Gilda's Club just talk about, is that they want to feel a sense of connection and belonging with other people. Let them know that if you want to talk, that you'll actually be there to listen, but then make sure that you're actually really emotionally available. Like, don't just say, hey, yeah, call me anytime. If they call, then make sure you are available to pick up, or that you're available to listen at the time when you can call them back. Also, you know, it's important, sometimes there are people who really kind of retreat, and they feel like they need to carve out a space of privacy. And that's okay too. And to really respect that privacy is actually sometimes needed for people to process, to go inward, to think about how their life is changing, and to just be respectful of that, and that you don't really need to take it personally, that it's okay. Offering support throughout the whole diagnosis, so beginning, during, and after. Like I said, oftentimes people will say, oh gosh, treatment is done, or you're moved through, you've gotten through this, good job. And I will hear 2 to 3 years later that they still feel like there are things that they're working on actively in their life. And so just because treatment is done, or just because a person has lost somebody, doesn't mean that that's the time. Those are almost the critical times where you really want to gather around somebody and still let them know that you're still there, you're still present. And then just try to keep the relationship as normal and balanced as possible. Cancer doesn't always have to be the topic of conversation. Sometimes it's really nice just to talk about that movie or that ball game, or if the Vikings won or lost, if that was your mode of relationship forming before. Cancer doesn't have to be the all-consuming, even though sometimes it really feels like it does. I often tell support group members, because I will hear lots of angsty stories about, oh, like I'm just mad because my family members can't show up for me in this way. But I'll say, think of the ways that they can show up for you. Like, maybe you do have that family member who just wants to talk about football. Did you used to just talk about football? Yeah, we used to just talk about football. So just talk about football. Maybe they can't support you in talking about cancer, but maybe they can give you a distraction in still talking about the Vikings winning or losing. So maybe even more importantly, try not to. And this is where I think people get really angsty. So if you say you know how people feel, oftentimes what I think we think that does is we hope that it's going to validate. But oftentimes what it does is it makes them feel like maybe you actually really don't know how they feel. Maybe their experience is different. Maybe their feelings around it are different. And so sometimes it can actually have the opposite effect where it actually alienates. So the most important thing you could actually do is really just listen to what they're talking about. Oftentimes too, people will say, oh, I'm so tired of having people tell me to be strong or to be positive. Sometimes those can be really empowering messages, especially if the person who's living with cancer is taking on those messages themselves. And to be able to reflect that can be really good. But for some people, they're like, oh, if one more person tells me to be positive or that things are going to be okay, I won't tell you some of the things that they say after that. But typically, what happens is that they just are really feeling like you're not able to meet them where they're at, right? And all people really want to do is to know that you can meet them where they're at. If they're having a bad day, just let them have a bad day. If they need to vent, just let them vent. Like, that's really okay. Because what that means is that you're just meeting somebody where they're at. And that's authentic, that's relational, that's relationship building. If somebody seems angry or upset or they don't want to talk, the other thing is that we have to have personal boundaries, right, as we're supporting people. And so we can't take that on personally. We can't take that on personally. We can't take their anger or their feelings on as being our own. We kind of have to go, no, that's yours. I can't take that on. But I'm going to call you in a couple of days because I'm still here. I'm still with you. I know feelings are just feelings. I'm not going to take that personally. Don't offer advice that they haven't asked for. Again, remember that fixing thing we talked about where you might want to fix something? And so our way of fixing might be to offer a lot of advice or to tell them, oh, you should eat that mushroom or you should try that smoothie or you should eat plant-based. That's actually not really super helpful, right? So if you can just help them by listening again, not offering advice, that's really key. And then certainly don't compare their situation to somebody else you know. Even if that person, again, really well-intentioned, sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, my family member who had this diagnosis and it was stage 4 lived to be 80 years old. Not super helpful, actually. And so you might want to find different ways of trying to support and trying to empathize. And really, again, it just comes back to listening. How can you be a good listener? How can you just meet people where they're at? So how do you listen well? How many of you think you're like excellent listeners? Nobody? Have you just tuned me out? So there is an art to listening. There really is. And listening is all about connecting. It's all about allowing other people to know that we're really here. So if you were to tell me a story, one of the things that I might do is, especially if I knew that this was a delicate situation and maybe there was a lot going on in your life, maybe I'd try to carve out some time where we could just spend time together and I could really listen to you. I could make eye contact with you. I could just really hear what it is that you're saying. And I might do a lot less talking than I'm doing now. I would do a lot more listening. And I gotta tell you, it sounds so simple, but listening, it's the total key. That's all, to show up and to be emotionally available for somebody, all you have to do is really show up and listen to them. No fixing, no advice giving, just show up and like be really in that moment. Be really with that person. Try not to interrupt. Give your full attention. If you're finding it difficult or upsetting, don't try to change the subject, because that actually feels invalidating. But if you're kind of like, oh gosh, I really want to fix this, I really want to offer some advice, maybe you could say that, like, oh man, I really want to just fix this for you, but I know I can't. So what I can do is I can just listen to you. Or, boy, it makes me so mad to hear that you're feeling so upset about this. But that's all I can offer you, is just know that I can totally feel what it is that you're talking about. I can connect with that. Okay, so how many people, like when you're in a grocery store and you see a baby and they're just crying, how many people try to like smile, like do something silly to make the baby smile, right? We just want to cheer people up. We want to fix things. But if somebody in this situation gets really tearful, it's okay. Let them have that moment. It's what they need. And for some reason, they're feeling safe enough to be in that moment and to be vulnerable enough to cry with you. And that's okay. So don't try to fix it. You don't have to try to cheer them up. Like, it's really okay. Because feelings, they come. They're like clouds. They just kind of pass. They're not permanent. Because we could have feelings like all day long, right? I don't know about you. Maybe you are just so super level, but I could be really happy. I could be really angry. I could be really confused. Feelings, they pass. They just pass. So if you think of that anger or those tears just kind of like a cloud, just let it pass. But again, if you can just really be present, that's a gift. Reassure them that it's okay. I'm cool with you being sad. No, it's fine. At Gilda's, I often tell people, because if I had a penny for every time somebody apologized to me for crying, I would actually probably be not feeling like I work at a nonprofit. I would make a lot of money. Every time somebody cried, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, really, your tears are welcome here. That's what this place is for. That's what this time is for. It's okay. This is normal. It is okay to cry. This is normal. We talked about advice. Sometimes humor can actually be really okay. If that person really is in a place where they're kind of finding humor, humor can really be a connecting point. It can help to create a way for this experience to feel a little less heavy. Humor can be really important. So Gilda's Club is actually named after the original Saturday Night Live comedian, Gilda Radner. And one of the things that I love about Gilda's story, her therapist actually told me this story when she came to us to visit when we were opening our doors. And her name is Joanna Bull, and she's like this 80-year-old kind of Buddha-like lady that you just want to follow around because she's just so zen and calm and amazing. And she was telling me the story about when she worked with Gilda out in California. And depending on your generation, you may or may not know of Gilda Radner. But Gilda was an original Saturday Night Live comedian, and she lived with ovarian cancer. And when she was living with ovarian cancer, she lived in California. And she was seeing this amazing therapist named Joanna Bull. And at one point, Joanna recognized that her humor was being diminished. And that was core to her sense of identity. And at that point, Joanna said, Gilda, this one-on-one work is great, but what you need is you need to go connect with other people who get it, who understand what it is that you're going through. And she said, I want you to go to this place called the Wellness Community. And Gilda went, and that was where she kind of found her people. And she said, cancer gave me membership into an elite club I'd rather not belong to. And so when people who hear that, who've been impacted by cancer, kind of go, yeah, this is really the club that we didn't want to belong to, but boy, when you connect with other people who understand, when you feel heard, there's a sense of relief, like you're not in this alone, that you're not alone. And to know that you're not alone in a time when it's so hard can be such a gift. So humor. And at Gilda's, we actually have improv. And I tell you, that is almost like a support group, except they laugh the entire time. The other thing that I will tell you is that silence is actually okay. So if you're trying to be a really good listener, and you're really trying to be with somebody in that moment, and if there's a lull, I always call it the 5-second rule. We kind of want to fill that space, right? We want to put in our juicy advice, give them the best thing that we got to give them. But I always say 5 seconds, count to 5. Just allow for the silence. Just allow for the silence. It's okay. You don't have to fill every space. Silence is good. In fact, silence is almost very important. So a little bit about self-care, because this feels a little heavy, right? So maybe everybody, in this moment, if you would play along with me, just put your feet on the ground. And there are 2 bones in your bum. They're called your sits bones. And if you just kind of wiggle in your chair a little bit, you didn't know you were going to dance, did you? And roll your shoulders up and just back down your spine. So just kind of Take a moment to connect with your body. And what I want you to do, just in your own time, I want you to imagine that there's a balloon in your belly, and that when you're going to breathe in through your nose, that it's going to expand. And then when you breathe out through your mouth, that you're just going to let the air out. So just in your own time, breathing in and letting go. 2 more times. Breathing in and letting go. And breathing in and letting go. So this concept of self-care is all about creating a little pause in your day to think about what is it that you need. Care for yourself is so important for anybody, regardless of where you're at in life. But sometimes when we're going through really challenging times, it's even more important to think of self-care. And breathing, intentionally breathing, becoming a little bit more mindful can be really critical to self-care. So lots of things that you hear about self-care. You can't fill it from an empty cup. You know, if you're on an airplane and the oxygen bags drop down, you put yours on before you put on your kids or your parents, right? So there's lots of messages about self-care. But how many of you, when you're on the plane and they're talking about the airbag dropping down, think, I don't know if I'd actually put it on. I might put it on my kid first. But the metaphor is, if you can't take care of yourself, will you have the capacity to care for somebody else? And that's why self-care is so critical. And even though it feels like it's the opposite of what we want to do, sometimes self-care is actually what we need to do. So self-care is really about identifying your needs. It's about making yourself a priority and then seeking solutions to fill those needs. But then almost even more challenging, it's about becoming a fearless advocate for what your needs are. And a lot of times, how many of you feel guilty when you try to have a little self-care time? Come on, totally raise your hand. Anybody, guilt? Yeah, so we feel guilty. We feel like we're selfish if we're trying to have some self-care moments. But the truth is, self-care isn't selfish at all. Self-care is actually a necessity. And so up here, it says, self-care is about taking care of your mind and your thoughts. It's about increasing your well-being through self-care behaviors. It's about caring for your emotions, your spiritual health, your physical health, and your body. So kind of a little esoteric, but when you really whittle it down, sometimes what I have people do is like a little self-care wheel. And so self-care for somebody could be having time. It could be being curious. It could be being mindful, focusing on process or community or prioritizing. So here's your prescription for self-care. Because if you can't choose to do it yourself, maybe if somebody prescribes you to do it, maybe you can then give yourself permission. So self-care is just about prioritizing yourself. It's about slowing down and being really self-compassionate. So have you ever had those days where you're feeling really tired, but you've got like this major to-do list, and you just simply can't make it through the list? And sometimes in the back of your head, you're going, oh, I should be able to do this. Oh, I need to go out and mow that grass, but I'm so tired. Self-care is about kind of minimizing the shoulds. It's about telling them to quiet down, to be compassionate for yourself, and to go, you know what? The grass can wait. I just need to care for myself. Maybe self-care is just taking an extra nap, carving out time for quiet reflection. It also means doing activities that you enjoy. And if you're living with cancer or if you're a caregiver, sometimes that means re-identifying new activities that bring you joy. It also means nourishing food and finding time for exercise. So 2 of the things that are most important for cancer survivorship are exercise and nutrition. And so that isn't surprising that those are actually really important things for well-being and self-care. Also, spending time with loved ones. We are social beings, And what gives us most meaning and purpose in life is connecting with people that make life meaningful. And so making that a priority can be really important, as well as making sleep a priority. And then probably the most difficult thing is asking for help. Who's really good at asking for help? Ah, I know some of you. I'm in that boat too. So the challenging thing about a cancer diagnosis is often, again, it changes things so much, right? And it can be really difficult for people to both ask for help, and the kicker is to receive help. But there can be some really wonderful things that happen when people are able to open themselves up to that. And I do believe that asking and receiving help can be an important part of self-care when you're a caregiver or when you're living with cancer or when you're trying to support somebody who is. So becoming okay with needing and asking for help, get good at saying yes. Identify what your needs are and then communicate them to others. So here's the tricky part. Because people will always say, oh my gosh, tell me what you need. How can I help? How can I help you? What do you need? And oftentimes people will say, oh my gosh, I know people are well-intentioned, but I don't know what I need. So if you can carve out a little time to really think, what are the tangible logistical things that people could do to help you? Maybe it's cutting your grass. Maybe it's lining up some housekeeping. There could be some things that might lighten your load. And then you could put out a list. And when somebody says, oh my gosh, I can do that, guess what you get to say? Yes. You get to say yes. And if you are having a really hard time struggling with this concept of saying yes, so try to switch it this way. If you're one of those people who are like, nope, like to do everything by myself, totally capable, I'm just going to trudge through this, because I don't want to burden other people, if that's what's going on in your head when I'm talking to you about saying yes, try to think of it this way. When people who love you, if you're in a really tough time, people who love you want to do something for you. It gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them a sense of meaning. They feel helpless too because they want to make your life better. So by saying yes, you are actually giving them a gift. Who ever knew it? You are giving them a gift because they now feel like they can help you, that they have a sense of meaning, they have a sense of purpose. So the next time somebody says, can I help you? You say yes. So again, cancer changes everything for everyone. Regardless if it's you living with a diagnosis or a caregiver, it's important to connect with people who get it. It's kind of what Gilda said. And the sense of community and connection can decrease feelings of aloneness and isolation. That's why a place like Gilda's Club exists, because again, a cancer diagnosis for both caregiver, family members, friends, it can be isolating. And being with others can offer new solutions, a broader system of support, and it increases resiliency. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, which you might be happy about, and I'm going to share a project that we did that was really meaningful. And this project was just Emmy nominated. It was created by TPT, Twin Cities Public Television, and it follows a really wacky concept to work with a modern dance company and give our members, people living with cancer, caregivers, people across the entire age spectrum, an opportunity to do a project where they tell their stories about cancer's impact through movement, music, and voice. We called it the Listen Project, and the reason this project came around was because so many people said, I don't feel understood. I don't feel like people get it. They don't get this whole cancer thing. And so we thought, well, is there a way to have people listen in a way that they get it? Because getting it is really about understanding. And understanding is really about empathy. And empathy is all about trying to put yourself in somebody's shoes just enough that you understand their experience from a different perspective than yours. It's about understanding. It's about listening. And so we partnered with Stuart Pimsleur Dance and Theater. We had over 100 of our members share their stories on cancer's impact. We had 23 of our members perform alongside of a professional dance company. We elevated our stories, took them out of the support group and onto the stage. We had, in fall of 2016, we had two 50-minute performances to an audience of nearly 1,000. And because of this documentary, our stories are still living on today.
Cities, a cancer support community, and Twin Cities PBS.
The Listen Project really began as a dream, a literal dream. I was running so many different types of support groups at the time, loss groups, family and friends groups, living with cancer groups. And for some reason that week, there was a common theme that people just don't get it. People who haven't been impacted by cancer aren't really understanding the effects that cancer has on everything from career to our sense of identity to our relationships. And in my dream, people were using modern art and movement to demonstrate cancer's impact on our lives. And I woke up the next morning and I thought, this dream has to come to life. This was amazing. And that's really how Listen began.
You know, I wasn't supposed to be here. Or should I say, I never imagined I would be here. I wish desperately that I could change it, but I cannot. So here I am facing this with no preparation, ad-libbing my premature demise. And how could that be? Shouldn't I have not gotten a memo, a warning, anything telling me what to expect?
It's great. Can we just go back to the top? Let's remember where these movements came from.
Suzanne Costello is the co-artistic director of Stuart Pimsleur Dance and Theater, and she was the person who answered the phone the day that I called and said, hey, I had this dream, and I would really like to know if you would be interested in partnering with us and collaborating to bring this dream to life.
That was it. So let's just do another run. And I just happened to be in the office when Allie called, and she started telling me that she'd seen our work some number of years ago and was very interested in having us do a performative project with Gilda's Club. And I was like, yeah, let's do this.
Gilda's Club is a cancer support community, and it's really the legacy of Saturday Night Live comedian Gilda Radner. It was formed so that nobody would face cancer alone.
Well, Gilda Radner, it depends on your generation, right? I loved her. She's Rosanna Dana. I mean, she's like this wacky comedian, and at the height of her career, she's diagnosed with cancer, and she feels in the middle of Manhattan like she's by herself. I think that's pretty profound.
What really makes Gilda's Club unique is the sense of community. This is non-clinical, it's non-medical. This is really a place where people can come and connect. People living with a diagnosis, family members, friends, children, anybody who's been impacted by cancer can come and have a place where they really can connect with others who truly get what that cancer experience is like.
I found out about Gilda's Club after I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in February of 2015.
I learned about Gilda's Club actually through my wife.
I first heard about Gilda's Club from an article in the newspaper, so that when my daughter then was diagnosed, I kind of knew what was going on.
Gilda's Club, I feel like, has just been a blessing for us. They offer so many different services, completely free of charge. Support groups for people with cancer and their caregivers. They have a craft room, which my daughter loves.
There's art therapy, there's yoga, there's a teen room, there's the children's room.
Speakers and programming. They have a giant kitchen where they do cooking classes.
Having a place where you can come and talk to other people who are experiencing the same things is really amazing. And then also having childcare at the same time is also amazing.
I
came through the Red Doors, and you come and you stay. That's what the Red Doors do.
As a pediatric oncologist, I saw very early on that cancer care isn't just the medical intervention. People who are cared for psychologically and socially have fewer other stressors that complicate their experience. If we do something to relieve that stress, then it's much easier for them to pay attention to medication schedules, appointments, things like that. And if the rest of their life is supported in some way or given some kind of order, we really create better outcomes. I think Gilda's Club has been able to construct an excellent program around those things.
There you go, okay? So straight this, attitude up, okay?
The Listen Project is really a collaboration between Gilda's Club and Stuart Pimsleur Dance and Theater to tell the stories about cancer through movement, music, and voice. We invited Stuart Pimsleur in to come and learn about our communities, to listen to our stories. And through the process of listening, Suzanne was able to draw out some common themes and begin to choreograph those themes and really put our stories into movement.
To your left, perfect, okay?
I didn't know what to expect when I first started.
I came to the first Listen event that they had just to find out what it was all about, and I kept coming, and I kept coming, and the next thing I knew, I was standing on the stage in a spotlight giving a monologue. How I got there, I'm not exactly sure.
When I was in college, I took modern dance classes as my sort of arts requirement, and I was terrible at it.
The experience was, in a way, a lot like the cancer experience, a lot of trust, and just moving one foot in front of the other, just getting through another day or another rehearsal and not knowing what it's going to be like in the end.
I was volunteering one day and I decided I'm just going to saunter down the hallway and pop into one of the practices and thought, I think I've landed on the moon. I knew nothing about this singing stuff, this humming, this artistic dance movements.
I'm not a dancer, still am not a dancer, but they got me moving, I have to say.
All right, let's try this whole thing.
I've been working in the field of community inclusive work for over 30 years, and our particular focus on arts and healthcare began in 1992, and Gilda's project is right in step with that focus that we have been very committed to.
What do you find you've been listening to in the broadest sense of the word?
I wanted first and foremost to just listen to people's stories. Whether these are people living with cancer, people who've lost somebody to cancer, somebody who has been diagnosed and has quote unquote survived cancer, but mostly people said people don't get it. I mean, people who aren't here with us in this experience don't get it.
A lot of people say cancer's the look good disease because you look great on the outside, but inside you might feel like the scrambled eggs you had for breakfast.
Here she goes. That's it. Good.
I was interested in the Listen Project and the dance piece in particular. I grew up dancing, and then I brought my daughter with. She is also a dancer, and so she decided to participate as well.
And that's the cue. There you go.
I felt like I could maybe speak a lot about all the different roles and the ways that cancer has touched my life. I was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia when I was 4, and I've worked in pediatric oncology and adult cancer research as a research nurse. And that's kind of been my life's work because of my childhood experiences with cancer. And then last spring, I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. And since it's already spread to my bones, it is not curable. For me, it's been important that I work on it with my daughter, and that part has been really meaningful to me, that it's something that we've been able to do and share together.
When your doctor says to you, you know, your life is now going to be measured in years rather than decades, it's a terrifying, terrifying moment. Last year, July 17th, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. terms of prognosis, it's the likelihood of having 3 years is good. The likelihood of having 5 years is 10%. It's really easy for people who don't have that much experience with people who are living with cancer to sort of, assume that it's being on a deathbed or, oh, it's just over, or, and I think that the experience of actually being in my situation is not like that, and I live each day and I get up with my kids and I have a beautiful morning, and sometimes it's an exhausting morning, and that's something that the Listen Project really helps express, is that it's not just baldness and keeling over, there's still life, even when you know that there's not necessarily that much of it.
Our medical director said about 30% of a person's experience is spent navigating the medical system. So what is happening in the other 70% of their time? And that's where Gilda's comes in, because the other 70% of your time is at work, at home, what's going on up here or what's happening in here. And it's the social, the emotional, the psychological effects of cancer that are often what we hear the hardest to navigate. They're the most complex, and that's why we exist. And so Gilda's Club, we offer support. You saw a lot of these things in the video. It also is a really nice way of learning a little bit more about us. We offer support groups. We have 18 weekly ongoing support groups for caregivers, those with cancer, those in post-treatment, those who are grieving the loss of someone. We offer education, healthy lifestyle activities, social opportunities, and information and referral. These are some of our support groups. They're facilitated by licensed mental health professionals. Some of the topics that we cover are cancer specific. It could be about Social Security, disability, lots of different types of classes that we offer. These are some pictures of our healthy lifestyle classes. So we offer nutrition and exercise, mind-body practice, and expressive arts. And then sometimes we just like to have fun. Usually that's around food. And so we often have potlucks. We have a chili cook-off coming up. We have book club. We have Euro Cafe. We have the Knitwits, which is our self-named group of knitters. I did not name them. And we have a big family and friends day. And so again, we really believe that it's about coming together. It's about belonging. It's about community. It's about connection. And when we talk about self-care, that connection with other people is so important, because we are social beings and we crave connection. We crave a sense of belonging. And again, just kind of like your church community is a community. It's a place where you belong. It's a place where you connect because you share the same value, you share the same belief. And that's kind of what Gilda's Club is too. When cancer comes into your life, sometimes you need an additional community to connect to who really understands and can help navigate the cancer experience. And I will tell you that it's people like me, not the licensed mental health professionals who are talking, who are the experts. It's our members. It's the individuals who are sharing with each other. That's the true gift of being a member at Gilda's, or even being a part of a church community. I hear you guys have a Living with Cancer group, and that's just so important and so wonderful. We do offer a lot of information and referrals, so if your life is currently impacted or you know of somebody, we're a phone call or an email away. Don't hesitate to give us a call. Even if you never set foot in our doors, we are happy to connect you. We're very much like the hub of the cancer community. We can get you easily connected or point you in the right direction really quickly. We also have programs for children, teens, and families. We have Noogie Night, which is our supervised child care place. Steve, who said, and it's great that they have child care too. His daughter and his son, his daughter was 6 months old when she started coming to Gilda's Club, and she's now 3. And his son, Henry, was 3, and he's now in elementary school. So they're kind of growing up with us. This is our community. It's really vibrant. It's really thriving. We have this really beautiful place that we exist within. People come, they go. Everybody's Gilda's experience is different and unique because everybody's needs are different and unique. So you're always welcome to come join our club. especially if it's a club that you already feel like you belong to. All you have to do is come to a new member meeting, and you can find more information. Again, I did bring some information on us if you want to use us as a referral, especially within your church community. Feel free to share this information with others, even if they weren't here tonight, about this resource, because we are glad to be a resource to people.